Hello, my name is Emily, and I'm going to be talking about language acquisition and socialization and why these are important topics to consider. The way in which children are so easily able to acquire language is extremely fascinating. What is even more fascinating is how children across all cultures and societies are able to become competent speakers of their native language or languages. The reason that this is so fascinating is pointed to in the fourth chapter of Laura Ahern's book, Living Language, where she discusses two infants, Katie, a 3-month-old infant from a white middle-class family in the United States, and Beige, a 3-month-old Kaluli boy living in Papua New Guinea. Katie's mother speaks to her in baby talk, also called motherese, and engages with Katie in a conversation by responding to all of Katie's noises and gestures. Beige, on the other hand, is treated in a very different way. He is placed facing away from his mother, and his mother does not try and have a conversation with him. Instead, Beige's mother speaks for him by addressing Beige's older brother as if Beige were talking to him directly and asks him to pick him up. In this way, Beige's mother is doing for Beige what he cannot do for himself. This comparison shows how differently infants can be treated as language learners in different cultural contexts, and yet all infants grow up to be competent language users in their respective societies. This is one observation that highlights that there must be some level of innateness involved in language acquisition. The ability to acquire language, however, is not entirely innate. Socialization into a particular society has a large impact on the way in which children acquire language as well. Children learn how to engage with and use their native language in ways that are socially acceptable within their society. The acceptable ways to engage with language depend largely on culture, and therefore the way in which children from particular cultures learn to engage with their native language allow them to be competent members of their society. The way in which language acquisition and socialization are intertwined is extremely fascinating. This relationship can have seriously negative implications, however, if certain ways of engagement are valued over others in a particular society. This is highlighted by S.B. Heath's study on preschool literary practices in the United States. He studied 3 different communities of children, a white middle-class community, a white working-class community, and a black working-class community. All of these children were socialized into language use in ways that were specific to their communities. Children from all the groups developed competence and literacy in the English language, although in different ways that were specific to their social community. Despite all groups of children developing competence, the white middle-class children were much more likely to succeed in school than children from the other 2 groups. This study shows that the different ways that certain groups of children are socialized into the English language largely reflect their ability to succeed in the United States school system because of the way in which success is based off of middle-class white socialization practices. Therefore, children who grow up in working-class black or working-class white communities, or really any other community besides a middle-class white one, are at a disadvantage. This is extremely troubling because it perpetuates inequality within society. Because certain groups are socialized in a way that allows them to succeed solely because this type of socialization is valued over other types of socialization, these groups are predisposed to succeed academically and in other formal settings as well. This must be heavily considered as new educational reforms are made in the United States to ensure that the standardized nature of education in the States is either abolished or transformed in a way that considers and values all language socialization practices to the same extent. Another interesting thing about language socialization is that it is a lifelong process. While language socialization is particularly important as children acquire their native language, it continues to occur whenever someone is exposed to a new social environment. Individuals observe what is considered acceptable language use in the new social context they find themselves in and learn to use language accordingly. An interesting example of this is explored in Elizabeth Mertz's 2000 study of language use in law schools, in which she argues that law students are socialized into using language and thinking about written language in a way that is beneficial when performing the duties of a lawyer. Another interesting example of this can be seen when considering African American English and the selective use of it by certain African Americans. Many African Americans fully recognize that Standard American English is the prestige dialect, and therefore choose to use this dialect of English rather than African American English in certain social contexts. In this case, some African Americans go through a process of socialization in which they come to understand that because African American English is stigmatized and considered a lesser or improper version of standard American English, despite this being untrue, they must pick and choose the social environment in which they use either African American English or standard American English. This process of language socialization is extremely enlightening in considering the complex ways that some individuals navigate their social environment. It is a process that is linked both to our acquisition of language as a child and to our ability as adults to use language effectively in many different social environments, and for these reasons seems to be an essential aspect of our linguistic lives as humans. Thanks for listening.